In the annals of ancient Egyptian history, some names shine brightly, etched in the stones of monuments and the hearts of the people. Among these names is that of Queen Neferu, a woman whose influence transcended the walls of the royal palace and resonated throughout the land of the pharaohs. While much of the world remembers Senusret I, the great ruler of Egypt's 12th dynasty, few realize that his greatness was forged not only by his own hands, but by the unwavering guidance and wisdom of his mother, Neferu. Queen Neferu's story is not just one of motherhood or royal duty, it is a tale of power, strategy, and vision. As the wife of Amenemhat I, the founder of the 12th dynasty, she stood beside him as an equal, playing an essential role in the kingdom's rise to prominence. But it was in her role as mother to Senusret I, her only son, that her true legacy would unfold. In an era fraught with political intrigue, military challenges, and the ever-present threat of succession crises, Neferu's influence was indispensable. When tragedy struck with the untimely assassination of Amenemhat I, it was Neferu who stepped forward, her strength and political acumen guiding the young Senusret through tumultuous times. Her leadership would ensure the stability of Egypt and lay the foundation for the prosperity that would follow during Senusret's reign. This is the story of Neferu, the queen who shaped the future of Egypt through her son. It is a tale of love, sacrifice, and profound impact, a mother's devotion, a queen's wisdom, and the extraordinary influence one woman had on the fate of an entire civilization. Through her guidance, Senusret I would become one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, securing his place in history and cementing her own legacy as one of the most powerful and influential women in Egypt's past. In the chapters that follow, we will explore Neferu's life, her role in the 12th dynasty, and the indelible mark she left on Senusret I's reign. This is more than a history, it is a tribute to the enduring strength of a mother whose wisdom shaped not just her son's destiny, but the destiny of an empire. The year was 1991 BCE, a time when Egypt was recovering from the chaos that had plagued it during the intermediate period. For centuries, the land of the pharaohs had seen internal divisions, weak rulers, and foreign invasions, but amid the disarray, a new force was rising, one that would restore Egypt's power and reshape its destiny. It was in this uncertain time that Amenemhat I, a skilled general and administrator, ascended to the throne, marking the beginning of the 12th dynasty. His reign brought stability to the fractured kingdom, but it was the quiet, yet profound influence of his wife, Queen Neferu, that would prove to be the foundation upon which Egypt's future was built. Neferu, whose origins remain shrouded in mystery, was more than just the consort of a king. She was a woman of strength, wisdom, and vision, whose influence reached far beyond the confines of the royal harem. Though much about her early life remains unknown, what is certain is that Neferu came from a family of high nobility, possibly even from royal blood herself. Her upbringing would have been one of privilege, yet her intelligence and understanding of the political landscape were what truly set her apart. When she married Amenemhat I, she did not merely become the queen of Egypt, she became his closest ally. In the world of ancient Egypt, the role of a queen was not a passive one. Queens often wielded significant political power, especially when their husbands were engaged in military campaigns or absent from the capital. Neferu was no exception. Under Amenemhat's reign, Egypt began to prosper again, and the foundations for the mighty 12th dynasty were laid. Neferu's presence in the court was pivotal in consolidating the kingdom's power. She was deeply involved in the administration of Egypt, participating in decisions that affected both the spiritual and temporal realms, while Amenemhat focused on expanding Egypt's borders and securing its military strength. Neferu's expertise lay in managing the internal affairs of the kingdom, ensuring the welfare of the people, overseeing the state's economic affairs, and handling diplomatic matters, in a period where the concept of co-regency was not uncommon. Neferu's role was vital, especially as she supported her husband in building a lasting legacy. She was not just a passive partner but a co-ruler in her own right, laying the groundwork for her son's eventual ascent to the throne. The 12th dynasty was firmly established, and its reign would go on to be one of the most prosperous in Egyptian history. Neferu's most significant contribution to Egypt's future, however, came not in the form of political reforms or military victories but in her most important role as a mother. She gave birth to a son, Senusret I, who would one day follow in his father's footsteps and become one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. Senusret's birth marked the beginning of a new chapter in Egypt's history. The young prince grew up under the watchful eyes of his mother, who, from an early age, recognized the importance of shaping his future. Neferu's nurturing nature was evident in the way she guided her son's education, preparing him not only to inherit the throne but to become a leader capable of guiding Egypt to even greater heights. From the moment of his birth, Senusret was destined for greatness. But the path to the throne was not always clear. Egypt, despite its newfound stability, remained vulnerable to external threats and internal power struggles. The death of a king was always a time of uncertainty, and in a land where succession was never guaranteed, Neferu's role as a mother became more crucial than ever. As Senusret grew, so did his understanding of the world around him. Under the tutelage of his mother, he learned the arts of diplomacy, statecraft, and warfare. Neferu ensured that her son was not only educated in the formal traditions of the court but also in the practicalities of ruling a kingdom. But even as Senusret flourished in his mother's care, the shadow of danger loomed. The political situation in Egypt remained volatile. Amenemhat I, despite his successes, faced opposition from both internal factions and external threats. The region was plagued by the rising power of neighboring tribes and the uncertain loyalty of his own officials. As Amenemhat I worked to solidify his rule, Neferu remained a steadfast pillar of support. But behind the scenes, she was already preparing her son for the inevitable, the day when he would take the throne. Neferu knew that Egypt's future depended not only on the strength of the monarchy but on the ability of her son to rule with wisdom and resolve. The time would soon come when the shadow of assassination would loom over the royal family, and Neferu would be forced to confront the greatest challenge of her life: the preservation of Egypt's throne and her son's future. As the years passed, the stability brought by Amenemhat I's rule began to solidify, and the kingdom flourished under his leadership. However, the nature of power, especially in a place as tumultuous as ancient Egypt, was always fragile. With the pharaoh's death on the horizon, be it from natural causes or the dangers that seemed to follow the throne, there was one unspoken truth that resided at the heart of the royal family. The preservation of the dynasty relied heavily on a smooth and uninterrupted succession. Queen Neferu understood this all too well. She was a woman who had spent her entire life navigating the complex political web of Egypt. A woman of foresight and intellect, who could read the shifting currents of royal favor and the delicate balance of power between the military, the court, and the priests. Her ability to understand the nuances of Egyptian politics was unmatched, and she wielded this knowledge with the care of a woman determined to secure her son's future. Senusret I's education was marked by her careful hands. She would have ensured that her son received the best teachers, scholars, priests, military officers, each one handpicked to mold the young prince into the kind of ruler who could uphold the legacy of Amenemhat I. The young Senusret was instilled not only with the formal knowledge of governance, the hieratic script, and the traditions of Egypt but also with a keen sense of the responsibilities of kingship. Neferu knew that for her son to succeed, he had to possess more than just the ability to wield power. He needed to command respect, understanding, and wisdom. Neferu was more than a mother, she was a mentor. She would have been a constant presence, guiding Senusret through the complexities of court life, offering him advice and instruction on how to manage the delicate web of alliances that kept Egypt's ruling elite in check. Senusret's formative years were characterized by Neferu's tutelage, and through her guidance, he would come to know what it meant to be a ruler, not just by blood, but by wisdom, patience, and strength. Yet even as Neferu prepared Senusret for the throne, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The stability that Amenemhat I had brought to Egypt would soon be threatened by forces beyond the royal family's control. In the year 1985 BCE, disaster struck. Pharaoh Amenemhat I, despite his many victories and the peace he had brought to Egypt, met an untimely death. It was not the natural course of time that claimed him, but rather the hands of treachery and assassination. The precise details of Amenemhat's death have been lost to time, but historians believe that the king was murdered, likely by a group of nobles or military officials who sought to take advantage of his absence. The royal family was thrown into turmoil. And for the first time in years, Egypt's future seemed uncertain. Neferu, devastated by the loss of her husband, immediately took control of the situation. Her instincts as a queen, honed by years of experience, kicked in. She knew that if Senusret I was to inherit the throne, he needed not only to secure his place within the palace but also to command the loyalty of the military, the priests, and the court. The Egyptian court was full of factions, powerful military leaders, influential priests, and ambitious nobles, each with their own ambitions and desires. With Amenemhat I's death, many of these factions would have sought to destabilize the monarchy in order to advance their own agendas. Neferu understood that her son, still young and inexperienced, would not be able to navigate these turbulent waters alone. Thus, she took it upon herself to ensure that he would not only be the legitimate heir but also the ruler Egypt needed. Neferu's first move was to consolidate the military. She immediately turned to the generals who had been loyal to Amenemhat I, reminding them of the stability that the pharaoh had brought to Egypt and the importance of preserving that legacy. She made sure that Senusret was placed under the tutelage of these military leaders, learning not only the skills of leadership but the practicalities of command. Neferu's influence over the military was crucial. By ensuring that her son had the loyalty of Egypt's armed forces, she laid the foundation for his future success on the battlefield. Neferu's next task was to secure the loyalty of Egypt's priesthood. In ancient Egypt, the priests wielded enormous influence, particularly in matters of religion and kingship. The priests were seen as the intermediaries between the gods and the people, and their support could determine the legitimacy of a ruler. Neferu, fully aware of the importance of the priesthood, worked tirelessly to maintain the support of the powerful religious leaders. She made strategic alliances with key religious figures, ensuring that Senusret would be accepted as the rightful ruler in the eyes of the gods. Throughout these months, Neferu was not only the mother of Senusret I but the pillar that held Egypt together. While her son was groomed to become the next pharaoh, Neferu's behind-the-scenes political maneuvering ensured that Egypt did not slip into chaos. Her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics, to maintain Egypt's strength during a time of uncertainty, and to protect her son's future would lay the groundwork for Senusret I's eventual ascent to the throne. As the months passed and the political situation began to stabilize, the court saw the growing influence of Senusret I, who began to emerge as the natural successor to Amenemhat I. Neferu's strategy had worked. She had positioned her son not only as the heir to the throne but as a leader in his own right. Finally, in 1971 BCE, Senusret I was officially crowned pharaoh of Egypt. The kingdom, though still reeling from the shock of Amenemhat I's death, found a new sense of direction under the leadership of the young pharaoh. But it was not Senusret's strength alone that secured his place on the throne, it was the wisdom, the foresight, and the tireless efforts of Queen Neferu that ensured his rise to power. In order to understand the strength of Queen Neferu, one must first look at the early life that shaped her into the woman who would one day guide the fate of Egypt. Though much of her early life remains a mystery, some elements of her story are clear. She was born into a time of profound change. And she emerged from humble beginnings, not as the daughter of a king, but as a woman who possessed the intelligence and cunning necessary to rise through the ranks of Egypt's complex political landscape. Neferu's family, while not part of the immediate royal bloodline, was undeniably of noble and influential stock. Historical records offer few details about her parents, but it is known that she was born into a family of high-ranking officials, possibly military leaders or noblemen. These ties to power allowed Neferu to establish connections that would later serve her well in her marriage to Amenemhat I. Raised during the turbulent years following the fall of Egypt's Old Kingdom, Neferu grew up in an Egypt that was still recovering from the chaos of the First Intermediate Period. The country was fragmented, divided between regional rulers and independent states, each vying for control of the Nile Valley. In this environment, Neferu learned from a young age the importance of securing power through alliances and diplomacy, traits that would define her approach to governance in later years. From her childhood, Neferu was highly intelligent, observant, and quick to learn the intricacies of court life. Although she was not born with the title of queen, she was nonetheless groomed for greatness. The teachings of her family, likely rooted in the traditions of royal advisors and military commanders, instilled in her the political acumen necessary to succeed in Egypt's competitive and often dangerous royal court. Her education was thorough, as it would have been for any daughter of noble standing. Neferu was trained in the arts of diplomacy, leadership, and religion, all of which were critical to the role she would later play in her husband's reign. From the priests, she learned the complex rituals and ceremonies that were so important to the pharaoh's divine status. From the military officers, she learned of strategy, defense, and the importance of keeping Egypt's borders secure. And from the scholars and advisors, she learned the value of knowledge, not just in the form of formal education, but also in the art of ruling effectively. When Neferu married Amenemhat I, the future pharaoh, she did not simply take on the title of consort, she became an active participant in Egypt's governance. Amenemhat I, a general who had led military campaigns in Nubia and Asia, knew the value of strong alliances and administrative skill. He saw in Neferu not just a wife, but a woman with the intellect and capacity to support him in his rule. Though Amenemhat would eventually become the pharaoh, Neferu was, from the very start, an indispensable partner. Her marriage to Amenemhat I was more than just a union of two people. It was the merging of two powerful forces. Neferu's family connections and influence helped solidify Amenemhat's position within the royal court. And in return, Amenemhat elevated her to the status of queen. Their partnership was a strategic one, each complementing the other's strengths, with Neferu providing the wisdom and steadying influence that Amenemhat needed to rule. In the early years of their marriage, Neferu and Amenemhat worked together to stabilize Egypt. The country had been fractured for too long, and Amenemhat's vision for Egypt was one of reunification and strength. His military campaigns were successful, but it was Neferu's influence that helped maintain peace within Egypt's borders and keep the administrative systems functioning smoothly. She was involved in everything, from managing the royal estates and resources to making decisions regarding the distribution of wealth and power. Neferu's presence at Amenemhat's side would have been indispensable, while Amenemhat was often away on military campaigns or dealing with external threats. Neferu remained at the heart of Egypt's political machine, ensuring the kingdom's day-to-day affairs were managed with care and efficiency. She was not merely a figurehead, she wielded considerable power, though it was exercised behind the scenes. Their partnership, however, was not without its difficulties. Though Amenemhat was a shrewd ruler, he was not without enemies. The political landscape of Egypt was fraught with tension, and Amenemhat's ascent to the throne had not been easy. His rise had involved making difficult choices, sometimes brutally so, and many in the court were not pleased with the way he had consolidated power. Neferu, understanding the dangers of royal politics, worked tirelessly to safeguard her family's position within the royal court. She knew the fragile nature of power, and that even a king with the support of the military could be vulnerable to betrayal and assassination. It was in these years, as Amenemhat worked to strengthen Egypt, that Neferu's influence would truly begin to take shape. She would have been central to managing the court's political affairs, cementing alliances with powerful figures and ensuring that Egypt remained united in the face of internal and external threats. More importantly, she was laying the groundwork for the future of the Egyptian throne. Her relationship with Amenemhat was built on mutual respect, but it was her relationship with their son, Senusret I, that would prove to be her legacy. Neferu was not only a queen and a wife but a mother with an extraordinary vision for her son's future. As Senusret grew, Neferu watched with a keen eye, carefully observing his talents and ensuring that he was trained for the moment when he would inherit the throne. His education in statecraft, warfare, and diplomacy was not just a matter of royal duty but a personal mission for Neferu. She understood that Egypt's future depended on the quality of the ruler, and she was determined to shape Senusret I into the king who could carry on the legacy of the 12th dynasty. In these early years, Neferu's role as a mother was not simply that of a caretaker but of a strategist, a visionary who was laying the foundation for the greatness of Egypt and the greatness of her son, Senusret I. As the wife of Amenemhat I and the mother of the future Senusret I, Neferu was not merely a figurehead, she was a vital force within the Egyptian court. While the king was away leading military campaigns and consolidating Egypt's power, it was Neferu who maintained the stability of the royal household and managed the intricate web of politics that kept Egypt's administration functioning smoothly. She was a queen in every sense of the word, shrewd, capable, and deeply involved in the daily operations of the kingdom. Unlike the passive roles often associated with royal consorts in ancient history, Neferu took on an active, hands-on approach in managing the internal affairs of the kingdom. She was not just the wife of Amenemhat I, she was his equal partner in governance. And together they formed a political alliance that would ensure the future of Egypt. Her influence extended beyond the confines of the royal harem, penetrating the very heart of the Egyptian state. Neferu's role as queen was far-reaching. Egypt was a land built on complex administrative structures, and Neferu was deeply involved in the management of the royal estates, which were vital to the wealth and power of the crown. The royal lands were enormous, and their control was central to maintaining the pharaoh's power. Neferu was tasked with overseeing these vast territories, ensuring that they were well managed, taxes were collected, and resources were distributed in a way that would benefit the crown and the people alike. Her responsibility extended beyond just the agricultural wealth of Egypt. Neferu was also instrumental in managing the state's economic resources, including trade routes and relations with neighboring kingdoms. Egypt, as a major player in the ancient world, had significant trade relations with Nubia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean. The queen's diplomatic skills were critical in ensuring that Egypt maintained peaceful, profitable relations with these regions. Through these diplomatic ties, Neferu helped ensure that Egypt's influence remained strong, even in the face of growing external threats. One of Neferu's most critical contributions during this time was her role in the religious and ceremonial aspects of the Egyptian court. Religion was the lifeblood of Egypt, it permeated every part of daily life. From the smallest rituals to the most significant state decisions, the pharaoh, as the intermediary between the gods and the people, was the central figure in Egyptian religious life, but his consort often shared in this sacred role. Neferu would have participated in numerous religious ceremonies and rituals that were integral to the well-being of the kingdom. She was not merely a passive observer in these ceremonies but an active participant. The queen's role was symbolic but also practical. She was seen as a goddess-like figure, embodying the divine feminine that balanced the godlike power of her husband. Her presence in these sacred ceremonies reinforced Amenemhat I's divine right to rule, just as her own status as queen elevated the royal family's connection to the gods. It was not only in the court that Neferu had influence. As queen, her role extended to the people. The Queen of Egypt was often seen as the protector of the nation's welfare. While the pharaoh was the ruler of the land, the queen's role was to ensure the prosperity and well-being of its people, particularly the women and children. As the mother of Senusret, Neferu also represented the ideal of motherhood and fertility in Egypt's cosmology. Her image was frequently associated with the goddess Isis, the protector of the pharaoh and mother of the divine heir. Neferu was both a symbol of Egypt's enduring strength and a protector of its future. Through her participation in the rituals of governance and religion, Neferu also solidified her relationship with Egypt's powerful priesthood. The priests held considerable sway in Egypt, as they were the interpreters of divine will, and their endorsement was crucial for any ruler. Neferu knew that the support of the religious elite would be critical to the legitimacy of her son's future reign. Throughout her years as queen, she worked to ensure that the religious establishment remained loyal to the throne. In return for her loyalty, the priests would honor her and her son, bolstering their position in the court. Neferu's influence was not confined solely to internal affairs. She also had a hand in the affairs of Egypt's military, which was essential for maintaining the kingdom's power. As Amenemhat I focused on military expansion and consolidation in Nubia and other regions, Neferu's advice and support were crucial in the military decisions that shaped Egypt's strategy. While it was Amenemhat who commanded Egypt's armies, it was Neferu who helped ensure that the military was supported and that Egypt's borders were secure. In this way, Neferu was a critical partner in every aspect of the administration. She was not only a queen in title but a co-ruler, managing the kingdom's economy, religion, military, and diplomacy alongside her husband. While Amenemhat I was the public face of Egypt's power, Neferu's behind-the-scenes influence ensured that Egypt remained stable, prosperous, and unified. As a mother, Neferu's role became even more important as Senusret grew. She began to prepare him not just for life in the royal court but for leadership. In a land where succession was a delicate matter, Neferu knew that it was vital for Senusret to be not only trained in the ways of governance but to be seen as a legitimate heir by the people and the court. She made sure that her son's education was holistic, balancing military training with the more diplomatic and religious responsibilities of a ruler. Senusret was groomed to rule Egypt as his father had. But with one key difference: Neferu was determined to ensure that her son's reign would be marked by wisdom, foresight, and a strong moral compass. She understood that, while strength and military power were essential, a ruler's true legacy was forged by the decisions he made for the betterment of his people. Through her guidance, Senusret was trained to be a ruler who not only commanded armies but also listened to the people, understood the economy, and revered the gods. Through all these years, Neferu was the steady hand that shaped the future of Egypt. She worked tirelessly, not just for the sake of her own power, but for the prosperity and future stability of the kingdom she loved. Her role in Amenemhat I's reign was not just that of a consort but a queen whose wisdom and influence were fundamental in ensuring the smooth transition to her son's rule. As Senusret came of age, it was clear that Neferu's legacy would endure not only in her son but in the strength of Egypt itself. The sun rose over the Nile Valley, casting its golden rays upon the land as the great river flowed through Egypt's heart. In the royal palace, there was a quiet anticipation in the air, for a momentous occasion was unfolding. Queen Neferu, though a regal figure of immense influence and wisdom, was a mother first. It was in the role of motherhood that her greatest legacy would be forged, through the birth of her son, Senusret, who would go on to be one of Egypt's most revered pharaohs. It was a time of great hope and trepidation. While Amenemhat I had brought Egypt stability and prosperity, there was always the looming uncertainty of succession. In ancient Egypt, the legitimacy of a ruler's reign depended not only on their power and military prowess but on the divine right granted by the gods. The birth of a son would solidify Amenemhat's legacy, ensuring the continuity of the royal bloodline. And for Neferu, the birth of Senusret was not just the arrival of a child, it was the assurance of her own role in Egypt's future. The palace was filled with preparations, as the midwives in attendance worked tirelessly in anticipation of the birth. The air was thick with both excitement and solemnity, the knowledge that the newborn child would one day inherit the mantle of Pharaoh, a weight heavier than any crown. Neferu, though royal and dignified in her every manner, was also a woman, her heart filled with hope and a deep, abiding love for the child who would shape Egypt's destiny. In the quiet chambers, Neferu lay in labor, her breaths deep and steady, reflecting a calm that came from within. She had already borne many children, but this one was different. This child was destined for greatness, and Neferu understood that she must be the one to guide him, teach him, and prepare him for the challenges ahead. The world outside may have been watching Egypt's future unfold, but it was inside this royal chamber, in the moments of deep pain and anticipation, that the true future of Egypt was being born. As the hours passed and the tension grew, a cry echoed through the royal halls. The birth of Senusret I had come. Neferu, exhausted but elated, gazed at her newborn son with a sense of profound satisfaction. Her heart swelled with love, but also with the heavy understanding of what this moment meant. Egypt's future now lay in the hands of this tiny child, and it was her responsibility to shape him into the ruler he was destined to be. The early years of Senusret I. As Senusret grew, Neferu's attention to his upbringing was meticulous. Every aspect of his life, from his education to his training, was carefully orchestrated by his mother, who understood that the future of Egypt rested on his shoulders. While Amenemhat I was preoccupied with the affairs of state and military campaigns, Neferu took it upon herself to be the central figure in Senusret's life, nurturing him both intellectually and spiritually. Senusret's early childhood was marked by an intense focus on learning. Neferu made sure that the best tutors were brought to the royal court, and Senusret was taught the ways of Egypt's history, the gods, and the duties of a ruler. He was introduced to the principles of statecraft, military tactics, and diplomacy, skills that would serve him well when the time came to rule. But it was also important to Neferu that her son learn the values of justice, compassion, and wisdom, qualities that she herself embodied. The queen ensured that Senusret was surrounded by those who would help guide him to greatness. He was tutored by Egypt's finest scholars, who instilled in him not just the technical knowledge of governance, but the moral principles that underpinned Egypt's success. The priests, too, played a role in Senusret's early education, teaching him the sacred rites and rituals that were central to Egypt's culture. The young prince learned how to honor the gods, understand the workings of the universe, and appreciate the divine order that sustained Egypt's prosperity. Neferu did not just focus on intellectual education. She also understood the importance of military training in the life of a future pharaoh. She ensured that Senusret was trained in the arts of warfare, understanding that a ruler who could command his armies would be respected both in Egypt and beyond. Military leaders and generals were brought in to teach Senusret about tactics, strategy, and the realities of leadership in battle. The young prince learned how to ride horses, command troops, and understand the complexities of warfare, skills that would serve him well in the years to come. But even as she prepared Senusret for the weight of the crown, Neferu remained ever present, teaching him the more subtle lessons of leadership. She guided him through the intricacies of governance, showing him how to maintain peace within Egypt's borders, how to balance the needs of the people with the demands of the powerful elites, and how to rule with fairness and wisdom. Neferu instilled in Senusret a deep sense of responsibility. His reign would not just be about power and conquest but about ensuring the prosperity of Egypt and its people. Despite the rigorous training and intense preparation, Neferu always ensured that Senusret's childhood remained balanced. He was given time to play, to learn the arts, and to engage in the cultural practices that were central to Egyptian society. Music, poetry, and art were not just seen as distractions but as vital elements in the formation of a well-rounded ruler. Neferu understood that a pharaoh who could inspire through art and culture was a pharaoh who could rule not only by might but by the power of his ideas and ideals. As the years passed, Senusret's understanding of his future role began to solidify. He knew that his mother was preparing him for something far greater than any young prince could imagine. His relationship with Neferu deepened as he grew older. She was not only his mother but also his most trusted advisor and mentor. It was from her that Senusret learned the art of leadership, and it was her example that he followed in every decision he made. Through all of this, Neferu remained a central figure in Senusret's life. She was his rock, the steady presence that helped guide him through the complexities of Egyptian life. She continued to teach him the values of compassion, justice, and wisdom, and she instilled in him the belief that his reign must be one of greatness, not just in military triumphs, but in the way he ruled and treated his people. In the years to come, the world would see Senusret I as a pharaoh of exceptional power and wisdom, a ruler who would bring Egypt to new heights. But behind every decision, behind every victory, was the quiet influence of Queen Neferu, whose teachings and guidance shaped the man who would one day become one of Egypt's greatest kings. The air in the royal palace was heavy with tension. For years, Amenemhat I had led Egypt with strength and vision, guiding the kingdom through turbulent times and ensuring that it was once again a powerful force in the ancient world. His military campaigns had brought stability to the borders, and his administrative reforms had made Egypt a prosperous nation. But as time passed, the aging pharaoh's health began to decline, and the uncertainties of the future began to cast a shadow over the kingdom. For Queen Neferu, the wife of Amenemhat I, this was a time of both reflection and apprehension. She had stood by her husband's side through every battle and every triumph. But now, the inevitability of his mortality was inescapable. The question that had always loomed over Egypt, who would succeed the throne, had never felt more urgent. Neferu knew that the strength of Egypt's future would depend on a smooth transition of power. And her son, Senusret I, was the key to that future. In the quiet halls of the royal palace, Neferu had prepared for this moment for years. The time for Senusret to take the throne was fast approaching. But the political landscape was far from stable. Egypt was still vulnerable to the ambitions of nobles within the court. And there were always those who sought to undermine the monarchy for personal gain. Neferu understood that her son's succession could be threatened by the many factions vying for power, both within Egypt and from foreign influences. But even in these uncertain times, she remained steadfast. She had raised Senusret with the wisdom and discipline necessary to navigate the treacherous waters of Egyptian politics. As much as Senusret had been groomed for leadership, Neferu had also prepared herself for the role of protector. She knew that her son would need her guidance in these critical moments, and she was determined to ensure that Egypt's throne would not fall into the hands of those who would see the kingdom destroyed. The palace was filled with whispers as Amenemhat I's health continued to worsen. Neferu remained by his side, quietly offering her support as the pharaoh's life slipped away. The pain of watching her husband's decline was a sharp contrast to the ambition and drive that had once marked his reign. But Neferu was not one to let grief overcome her. She had a duty to her people, and that duty was to ensure the survival of Egypt's legacy. On a quiet night in 1985 BCE, Pharaoh Amenemhat I passed away, leaving the throne to his son Senusret I. The news spread quickly throughout the kingdom, and the royal court was thrown into turmoil. The death of a pharaoh was always a time of great uncertainty, as it often meant that power struggles would follow. Neferu knew that Egypt's future was in jeopardy, and she immediately sprang into action. As her husband's body was prepared for burial, Neferu took charge of the palace. She called upon Egypt's military commanders and priests, reminding them of the strength and unity that had defined Amenemhat's reign. Neferu knew that the loyalty of these powerful figures was crucial if her son's reign was to begin without conflict. The nobles, military officers, and priests were all reminded of their duty to the crown and to the kingdom that had prospered under Amenemhat's leadership. Senusret, still a young man, was thrust into the role of pharaoh at a time of immense pressure. Though he had been groomed for the throne by his mother, the weight of leadership was never easy to bear. As Neferu watched her son step forward to take his father's place, she was filled with a mixture of pride and worry. Senusret had the potential to lead Egypt to even greater glory, but the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The death of Amenemhat I had created a power vacuum in Egypt, and Neferu knew that the key to ensuring Senusret's success lay in securing the loyalty of the military and the court. The royal family's enemies would surely try to exploit the moment of transition to seize power for themselves. Neferu, however, was no stranger to the intricacies of palace politics. She had navigated the court for years, and now, it was time for her to guide her son through the perilous waters of Egyptian politics. Senusret's first act as pharaoh was to perform the sacred rituals that would cement his legitimacy in the eyes of the gods. The priests, loyal to the throne, performed the rites that would officially make Senusret the new ruler of Egypt. Neferu stood by his side, her presence a reminder of the strength and wisdom that had shaped her son into the man he had become. The priests declared Senusret to be the chosen ruler, and the people of Egypt were assured that the land would remain in safe hands. But despite the religious ceremonies and public proclamations, the true test for Senusret and Neferu lay in the court's political dynamics. As pharaoh, Senusret had to immediately assert his authority, and Neferu knew that this could not be done through force alone. She worked tirelessly behind the scenes, forging alliances with powerful generals, nobles, and priests. She reminded them of the stability and prosperity that Egypt had enjoyed under Amenemhat I and the crucial role that Senusret would play in continuing that legacy. Neferu's influence was key in these early days. While Senusret focused on asserting his authority, Neferu worked to maintain the balance of power within the court. Her guidance was critical, and the young pharaoh relied on his mother's experience to navigate the complicated and often dangerous political landscape. Neferu's careful handling of the court helped ensure that Egypt's transition of power was smooth, avoiding the chaos that so often followed the death of a king. Despite the internal challenges, Neferu's efforts were not in vain. Slowly, but surely, Senusret began to solidify his power. The military remained loyal, the priests supported his reign, and the court gradually accepted him as their rightful ruler. Neferu, ever watchful, continued to offer her counsel, always ready to step in and guide her son when necessary. Her role in his early reign was indispensable. And it was clear that her wisdom and experience were what allowed Egypt to weather the storm of succession. As the days passed and the political situation stabilized, Neferu could take a deep breath, knowing that her son was now firmly in control of Egypt's future. The death of Amenemhat I had been a moment of great uncertainty. But through Neferu's strength, foresight, and unwavering dedication to her son, Egypt had emerged from the crisis stronger than ever. Senusret I was now the ruler of Egypt, and the kingdom was poised for even greater achievements under his reign. With the death of Amenemhat I, Egypt was at a crossroads. The kingdom had been ruled by a strong and visionary pharaoh, but his sudden demise had left a power vacuum that threatened to undo the stability he had worked so hard to achieve. The transition of power was a delicate matter, one that demanded not only the formal rituals of succession but also the careful navigation of political alliances, military loyalty, and the royal court's intricate dynamics. It was a time of uncertainty. But Queen Neferu was ready. She had not only prepared Senusret I for this moment, but she also understood that his ascension to the throne depended on far more than his divine right. Neferu knew that Egypt's future would not be shaped by Senusret's royal blood alone. The loyalty of the military, the court, and the priesthood was paramount in securing his reign. She had spent years carefully building alliances and cultivating relationships with key figures within these power structures. And now, those alliances would be put to the test. After Amenemhat's death, Neferu immediately took control of the situation. She convened meetings with the military commanders who had served under her late husband. These men, some of the most powerful figures in Egypt, had fought alongside Amenemhat I in his campaigns in Nubia and the Levant. They had secured Egypt's borders and expanded the kingdom's influence. And Neferu knew that their loyalty would be essential in ensuring her son's smooth ascension to the throne. Despite his youth, Senusret I quickly gained the military's respect. His training under the guidance of his mother, Neferu, had prepared him for this moment. He was well versed in the art of war, diplomacy, and the management of Egypt's vast empire. But Neferu's role was not just to pass on knowledge, it was to ensure that the military commanders, many of whom were ambitious and power-hungry, saw Senusret as a capable and worthy successor. Neferu's political acumen was evident in her ability to bring the military leaders to her side without bloodshed. She understood that power in Egypt did not rest solely on the pharaoh's ability to lead an army. It rested on the pharaoh's ability to manage his relationships with the court and military. While Amenemhat had ruled with an iron fist, Neferu knew that Senusret needed to rule with both wisdom and strength. She deftly balanced Senusret's authority with a diplomatic approach that won the loyalty of the generals, ensuring that Egypt's military was not only loyal to the throne but also firmly aligned with the vision of the new pharaoh. But military loyalty alone was not enough. The priests of Egypt, powerful figures in their own right, were also crucial in cementing Senusret's legitimacy. The pharaoh's rule was believed to be divinely sanctioned, and the support of the priesthood was essential for ensuring the public's acceptance of the new ruler. The priests were the intermediaries between the gods and the people, and without their blessing, any ruler would be seen as illegitimate. Neferu, with her sharp political instincts, understood the importance of the priesthood in this moment of transition. She knew that she had to act quickly to secure their loyalty. And she did so by reaffirming Egypt's commitment to the gods and the religious rituals that had defined the kingdom for centuries. She personally visited key religious figures, reassuring them of the new pharaoh's piety and dedication to Egypt's spiritual well-being. Neferu herself, as queen, was often seen as the earthly embodiment of the goddess Isis, the mother of pharaohs and the protector of Egypt. By maintaining the priesthood's trust, Neferu ensured that Senusret's reign would be regarded as divinely sanctioned, strengthening his position both in the court and in the eyes of the people. In addition to securing the loyalty of the military and the priests, Neferu worked to maintain stability within the royal court itself. She had seen the dangers of internal strife during Amenemhat's reign, when nobles and rival factions had vied for power. Neferu was no stranger to the complexities of court politics, and she carefully navigated the shifting allegiances of Egypt's elites. She ensured that the powerful viziers and advisors who had served Amenemhat remained in their positions, maintaining continuity within the government. But Neferu was also shrewd enough to know that the court could be a place of intrigue and deception. There were always those who sought to challenge the throne. And Neferu was vigilant in watching for signs of discontent among the nobility. She worked tirelessly to keep potential rivals at bay, using her network of allies to ensure that any moves against the throne were swiftly neutralized. In this way, she not only protected her son's position but also ensured that Egypt remained united during this time of transition. Despite the challenges of ensuring the loyalty of Egypt's elites, Neferu's political savvy paid off. The court, the military, and the priests all rallied around Senusret, and Egypt's transition of power proceeded smoothly. Senusret was formally crowned pharaoh in a grand ceremony, and his reign was immediately accepted by both the elite and the common people. Yet Neferu's influence did not stop there. She continued to serve as an advisor and guide to Senusret throughout his early years as pharaoh. Her experience in governance, diplomacy, and religion was invaluable to him as he began his reign. Neferu worked behind the scenes, ensuring that Senusret's policies were implemented smoothly and that Egypt's administration remained stable. She played an active role in managing Egypt's vast resources, overseeing the state's economic policies, and advising on matters of foreign relations. Neferu's political influence during this period was crucial in establishing Senusret I as one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. While Senusret's military campaigns and achievements would go down in history, it was Neferu's steady hand that helped guide Egypt through its most difficult moments. Her wisdom, her foresight, and her unwavering dedication to her son's success allowed Egypt to thrive during this critical period. And she laid the foundation for the greatness that Senusret would later achieve. With the formalities of Amenemhat I's passing behind them and the kingdom's power solidified through Neferu's masterful political maneuvering, Egypt entered a new era under the rule of Senusret I. The transition, though smooth, was fraught with challenges, and the young pharaoh now faced the monumental task of consolidating his power while managing a kingdom poised at the height of its influence. While the gods had spoken in his favor, and the court had accepted his authority, the true test for Senusret was now at hand. He had inherited not only the crown of Egypt but also the weight of responsibility that came with it. Senusret I, though a capable young ruler, knew that the early years of his reign would be crucial, as much as his military training had prepared him for leadership on the battlefield. His greatest challenge would lie in maintaining the delicate balance of power within Egypt itself. For a king's authority was not guaranteed solely by military might. It rested on his ability to maintain the loyalty of his court, his military leaders, and, most importantly, the people of Egypt. Neferu, who had been his guiding hand from the moment of his birth, remained by his side in these early years. Though she no longer held the title of queen, her influence was felt throughout the palace and court. Senusret knew that he could trust no one more than his mother, whose wisdom, foresight, and experience were indispensable as he navigated the complex politics of the royal court. Neferu's advice was invaluable in these early days. She reminded Senusret of the importance of unity. Egypt, though a prosperous kingdom, had always faced internal divisions. The elite had their rivalries, the military had its factions, and the priests had their own agendas. To rule effectively, Senusret would need to unite these forces, ensuring that all worked toward the common goal of Egypt's prosperity. Neferu, who had lived through the complexities of court politics, knew that Senusret's authority could be fragile if not carefully managed. It was her counsel that helped him navigate these early challenges. In addition to courtly intrigue, Senusret's reign was defined by the pressing need to secure Egypt's borders. Though Amenemhat I had expanded Egypt's influence, particularly in Nubia, the southern frontier remained vulnerable to attack. Senusret knew that he would need to act quickly to solidify his military strength and assert his dominance over these regions, ensuring that Egypt's wealth and resources from the south would remain firmly under its control. The Nubian Campaign, the first major military campaign of Senusret's reign, came swiftly, an expedition to Nubia. The kingdom of Nubia, rich in gold and other valuable resources, was of immense strategic importance to Egypt. While Amenemhat I had established a strong presence in the region, the Nubians were not easily subdued, and sporadic raids into Egyptian territories had continued. Senusret, Understanding the need to maintain Egypt's control over Nubia, assembled an army and led a series of military campaigns to secure the region once and for all. Neferu, ever the strategist, offered counsel on the campaign, reminding her son of the importance of unity in the military ranks. While Egypt's army was formidable, it was crucial to ensure that the generals, soldiers, and leaders remained united in purpose. Neferu's guidance on military strategy helped Senusret achieve early victories, strengthening his reputation as a capable and determined ruler. The campaign in Nubia was decisive. Senusret's forces not only repelled the Nubian resistance but also expanded Egypt's influence in the region. Fortresses were established, and Egypt's authority was reasserted over the southern lands. The success of this campaign solidified Senusret's military credibility, earning him the respect of his generals and the loyalty of the military. The young pharaoh had demonstrated that he could lead with strength and decisiveness, qualities that would define his reign. The Nubian campaign also had a profound impact on Egypt's economy. With the newly secured territories, Egypt's wealth grew exponentially, particularly from the gold mines that were now under direct Egyptian control. Senusret's ability to expand Egypt's wealth through military conquest would prove to be one of the defining aspects of his reign. Building alliances. While Senusret's military success was essential, Neferu reminded him that power in Egypt was not solely derived from the sword. The pharaoh's ability to maintain alliances, both within and beyond the borders, was just as important. Neferu, ever the diplomat, encouraged Senusret to build relationships with neighboring kingdoms, ensuring that Egypt's influence in the region extended far beyond its military might. Senusret began to forge diplomatic alliances with the kingdoms of the Levant, using both marriage and trade agreements to expand Egypt's sphere of influence. One of his early diplomatic successes was securing peace with the Kingdom of Canaan, an important trading partner. By offering favorable trade terms and promising protection, Senusret was able to secure Egypt's access to valuable goods from the Levant, strengthening the kingdom's economic power. Neferu played a critical role in these diplomatic efforts, using her influence to counsel Senusret on the importance of maintaining Egypt's status as a dominant power in the region. She reminded him that while military might was essential, diplomacy and wise alliances were just as important in ensuring Egypt's long-term stability. The building of temples and monuments. While military and diplomatic concerns dominated the early part of Senusret I's reign, Neferu also encouraged her son to invest in the arts, religion, and monumental architecture. In ancient Egypt, the construction of temples and monuments was a reflection of a pharaoh's greatness, and Neferu understood that for Senusret to be seen as a great ruler, he needed to leave a legacy that would endure for centuries. Senusret commissioned the construction of a series of grand temples and monuments throughout Egypt, dedicating many of them to the gods and to the glory of the pharaohs. These structures not only served religious purposes but also reinforced Senusret's divine right to rule. The construction projects also served as a means of consolidating power within Egypt, creating a network of temples and monuments that symbolized the unity of the kingdom under his reign. Neferu, ever the supporter of the arts, encouraged Senusret to patronize Egypt's greatest architects, sculptors, and artisans. Under her guidance, the pharaoh's court became a center of artistic and intellectual achievement, where scholars and artists from across Egypt came to contribute to the cultural flourishing of the kingdom. As the early years of Senusret I's reign unfolded, it became clear that his path to greatness was not solely a product of his military victories or diplomatic successes. Behind every decision, behind every proclamation, stood Queen Neferu, his most trusted advisor and protector. Her influence during these formative years of Senusret's reign was profound, as she continued to guide him through the complex and often perilous waters of rulership. While the young pharaoh had shown remarkable promise, Neferu knew that the true challenge of kingship lay not in the victories on the battlefield, but in the balance of power within the palace and the court. She had spent years navigating the delicate politics of Egypt's elite, and now, she was teaching her son how to do the same. Her wisdom, honed over decades of dealing with the intricacies of royal governance, was the steadying force that Senusret needed to build a stable and prosperous kingdom. Neferu's role had always been that of a silent but powerful presence in the background. But as Senusret began to step into his full role as pharaoh, she became even more integral to his rule. Her counsel was sought not only on matters of politics but also on religious and military affairs. Neferu's understanding of Egypt's spiritual life, its religious obligations, and its relationship with the gods was unparalleled. She reminded Senusret, time and again, that a ruler's legitimacy came not only from the might of his army or the wealth of his coffers but from his connection to the divine order that governed Egypt. The role of religion and legitimacy. Senusret I, as pharaoh, was not just the king of Egypt, he was considered a living god, the divine intermediary between the gods and the people. Neferu had instilled in her son an understanding of the profound weight of this responsibility. As pharaoh, Senusret was tasked with ensuring the favor of the gods, maintaining Ma'at, cosmic order and justice, and safeguarding Egypt from chaos. This responsibility was especially important during the early years of his reign, as Egypt had suffered from internal divisions and external threats in the past. Neferu, always attuned to the spiritual underpinnings of the monarchy, reminded Senusret of his sacred duty to the gods. One of Neferu's greatest contributions to her son's reign was her guidance in religious matters. She understood that in order to maintain Egypt's divine right to rule, Senusret needed the backing of Egypt's priesthood, who held great influence over the people. The priesthood was an essential force in ensuring that the pharaoh's power remained legitimate in the eyes of the Egyptian populace. Neferu worked tirelessly behind the scenes to strengthen Senusret's ties to the priests, ensuring that Egypt's religious elite remained loyal and supportive of his rule. She was a constant presence in the temples, making offerings to the gods, organizing rituals, and ensuring that Egypt's spiritual needs were met. Neferu knew that a pharaoh's reign could falter without the right relationship with the divine, and her careful stewardship of Egypt's religious affairs ensured that Senusret's legitimacy was never questioned. The preservation of Ma'at. Throughout Senusret's reign, Neferu emphasized the importance of Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian concept of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. As the embodiment of Ma'at, the pharaoh was expected to uphold the values of fairness and righteousness throughout the land. Neferu instilled in Senusret a deep respect for these principles, and she encouraged him to make decisions that would reflect the ideal of Ma'at. Under her tutelage, Senusret grew not only as a warrior and ruler but as a man of justice. He was reminded that Egypt's strength did not come from the oppression of its people but from the prosperity and fairness that his rule ensured. This understanding would guide Senusret throughout his reign, allowing him to become a ruler known for his wisdom and fairness. Neferu's influence in shaping his sense of justice would ultimately define much of his legacy. The strength of the military and unity. While Neferu had instilled in her son the importance of Ma'at and spirituality, she also knew that Egypt's military might was essential to the stability of the kingdom. The Nubian campaign had proven Senusret's ability as a military leader, but there were still threats from within Egypt's borders that could destabilize his reign. Neferu was always aware of the importance of unity, and it was her steady hand that ensured Egypt's military leaders remained loyal to Senusret. The military in ancient Egypt was not simply a tool of conquest, it was the protector of the state. Neferu understood the delicate balance between military strength and civilian governance, and she worked to ensure that the generals, commanders, and soldiers were reminded of their duty to the pharaoh and the people of Egypt. She advised Senusret on military matters, reminding him that power could be won and lost not just on the battlefield but in the loyalty of his soldiers and commanders. Senusret's success in maintaining Egypt's military strength was, in large part, due to the guidance of his mother. She also helped to solidify the alliances between military leaders and the court, making sure that the generals remained firmly in Senusret's service. With Neferu's guidance, Senusret was able to maintain the loyalty of Egypt's military, ensuring that Egypt's military might was always a stabilizing force in the kingdom. A kingdom united under one ruler. Neferu's influence did not stop at politics, religion, and military strategy. She also worked to ensure that Egypt was united under one ruler. Egypt, historically, had experienced periods of division and fragmentation. The power struggles within the royal court, the ambitions of the nobles, and the threat of foreign invasions had all threatened Egypt's unity in the past. Neferu knew that for Egypt to remain strong and prosperous, Senusret had to rule with a steady hand, bringing all the factions together under one common goal. She advised Senusret to make sure that the regions of Egypt, from the bustling cities of the delta to the distant lands of Nubia, were governed with fairness and consistency. By ensuring that Egypt's internal affairs were managed with justice and stability, Neferu helped Senusret create a unified kingdom, one in which the pharaoh's authority was unquestioned and the people's loyalty was secure. Through her tireless work behind the scenes, Neferu became the silent protector of Egypt's future, while Senusret took center stage as pharaoh. It was his mother's wisdom and influence that ensured his reign was marked by success and unity. As a mother, a queen, and an advisor, Neferu had fulfilled her role with unmatched dedication. Her teachings would live on through Senusret's actions, and her influence would forever be felt in the greatness of his reign. With the kingdom of Egypt solidified under his rule and the foundations laid for a prosperous reign, Senusret I found himself in a unique position, one where the opportunities for Egypt's growth and development were immense. While his early years as pharaoh had been marked by the critical challenges of succession and the consolidation of power, the stability he now enjoyed allowed him to turn his attention to the long-term vision of Egypt's future. With Queen Neferu at his side, guiding him with her wisdom, the young pharaoh sought to ensure Egypt's prosperity for generations to come. In this pivotal period of his reign, Senusret focused on reinforcing Egypt's strength in every area, militarily, economically, and culturally. His vision was clear. Egypt would not only remain powerful but would grow stronger, wealthier, and more influential, standing as the dominant force in the ancient world. The military legacy. Senusret's success as a military leader had already been proven during his campaign in Nubia. Under his command, Egypt had solidified its control over the vital gold mines of the south, securing both Egypt's military might and its economic resources. But Senusret's vision went beyond territorial conquest. He understood that Egypt's military strength needed to be maintained and modernized if it were to stand firm against any threats, internal or external. Neferu, ever the astute advisor, was quick to remind her son that military power was not only about the size of the army but the effectiveness of its organization and the loyalty of its commanders. She urged him to continue strengthening the structure of Egypt's military, ensuring that the soldiers were well trained, disciplined, and united under the pharaoh's leadership. Senusret heeded his mother's counsel. Investing in the further development of Egypt's military infrastructure, he commissioned the building of new fortifications along the borders, particularly in Nubia, where Egypt's control over the gold mines was still vulnerable. These fortifications served not only as defensive structures but as symbols of Egypt's unwavering power and authority in the region. But Senusret was not solely focused on defense. He understood that the best way to maintain peace was to project strength. With his army secure and battle-tested, he used Egypt's military might as a tool of diplomacy, securing peace and prosperity through the threat of force when necessary. His military campaigns were no longer just about expanding Egypt's territory but about preserving Egypt's status as a superpower in the ancient world. Economic prosperity. While military power was essential, Senusret understood that Egypt's strength depended just as much on its economic stability. With vast agricultural lands along the Nile, rich deposits of gold in Nubia, and thriving trade routes to the Levant and beyond, Egypt was a kingdom poised for economic success. But Senusret was not content with merely maintaining the status quo. He wanted Egypt's wealth to grow. And Neferu, always focused on long-term prosperity, encouraged her son to pursue avenues of economic growth that would secure Egypt's future. Neferu's insights were invaluable when it came to trade. She recognized that Egypt's most powerful asset was not just its physical wealth but its ability to maintain favorable trade relations with neighboring regions. Neferu, with her diplomatic acumen, advised Senusret to strengthen Egypt's trade routes, ensuring that Egypt continued to be a hub for commerce in the ancient world. She encouraged him to establish strong trading alliances with the kingdoms of Canaan, Syria, and Mesopotamia, opening up Egypt's economy to new markets and opportunities. Senusret followed his mother's guidance, ensuring that Egypt's economy was diversified, He not only expanded trade in luxury goods like gold, linen, and papyrus but also worked to ensure that Egypt's agricultural wealth, particularly grain, was distributed across the Mediterranean. Egypt's position as the breadbasket of the ancient world allowed it to maintain strong economic ties with its neighbors while also keeping its own people well-fed and prosperous. One of the most significant steps Senusret took to ensure Egypt's economic growth was his investment in infrastructure. Under his rule, the building of roads, bridges, and canals reached new heights. These infrastructure projects not only facilitated the movement of goods and people across Egypt but also served as a testament to Senusret's commitment to Egypt's future. The expansion of irrigation systems along the Nile allowed for greater agricultural yields, supporting Egypt's growing population and ensuring that the kingdom could withstand periods of famine or drought. Cultural and intellectual renaissance. While Senusret's reign was marked by military and economic success, it was also a period of profound cultural and intellectual achievement. Senusret, influenced by the wisdom of Neferu, understood that the greatness of Egypt did not only lie in its military strength or wealth but in its ability to foster art, science, and intellectual thought. Neferu had always emphasized the importance of culture as a means of building unity and inspiring greatness, and Senusret took her advice to heart. Senusret was a patron of the arts, commissioning grand architectural projects that would leave a lasting legacy in Egypt's history. He ordered the construction of magnificent temples dedicated to the gods, each one a masterpiece of Egyptian architecture. The most famous of these was the Temple of Amun at Karnak, which became a symbol of Egypt's religious devotion and cultural sophistication. These monumental structures were not only places of worship but also symbols of the pharaoh's power and the stability of the kingdom. Senusret also encouraged the development of Egypt's artistic traditions. The pharaoh was keen to ensure that Egypt's artisans and craftsmen had the resources they needed to produce works that would endure for centuries. Neferu had always believed in the importance of culture as a reflection of Egypt's identity, and Senusret's patronage ensured that Egypt's artistic legacy was solidified for future generations. Intellectual achievements also flourished during Senusret's reign. Neferu had always believed that knowledge was key to a ruler's success, and she had ensured that Senusret was well educated in the sciences, philosophy, and history of Egypt. Under Senusret's patronage, Egypt's scholars made great strides in fields like medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. These advancements would not only benefit Egypt's administration but would also shape the broader intellectual landscape of the ancient world. Senusret's reign became a cultural renaissance, marked by advancements in literature, architecture, and intellectual thought. This period of cultural flourishing reinforced the idea that Egypt's strength was not solely derived from its military might or wealth, but from its intellectual and artistic achievements as well. Under Senusret I, Egypt became a beacon of civilization, attracting scholars, artists, and traders from all corners of the ancient world. As the years passed, Egypt under the reign of Senusret I continued to thrive, its strength unwavering and its prosperity unmatched. The kingdom's borders were secure, its military respected, and its economy flourishing. But the true legacy of Senusret I's reign was not only in the tangible achievements of his rule, it was in the principles that had guided him from the start. And at the core of those principles was the wisdom, strength, and leadership of Queen Neferu. Though Senusret had ascended the throne as Egypt's pharaoh, it was impossible to ignore the profound influence of his mother. Neferu's quiet yet formidable presence had shaped his leadership, molding him into a ruler who sought to maintain truth, justice, and order, not just through military conquest but through wisdom and fairness. The queen's influence had gone beyond the court. It had permeated every aspect of Egypt's governance, its culture, and its very identity. Throughout Senusret's reign, Neferu remained a guiding force in his life. Even as her son grew into his role as pharaoh, Neferu's wisdom continued to shape his decisions. Her counsel was sought not only for matters of state but for the kingdom's moral and spiritual direction. Senusret never forgot that his power came not only from the strength of his armies but from the favor of the gods. And it was Neferu who had instilled in him this understanding, the legacy of wisdom and stability. Neferu's guidance was not limited to the years of Senusret's early reign. As the pharaoh grew more experienced, he continued to seek her advice, especially in times of uncertainty. Even though Egypt was prosperous and its future seemed secure, there were always challenges that required careful consideration. The threat of internal rebellion, the need to balance the demands of Egypt's powerful elites, and the complexities of maintaining diplomatic relations with neighboring kingdoms, all of these required a steady hand. It was in these moments of difficulty that Senusret turned to his mother. Neferu's ability to balance the often competing demands of military strength, religious devotion, and political unity was invaluable. She had managed these challenges for years, and now she passed on her wisdom to Senusret, who applied her teachings to his rule with remarkable success. Under Neferu's tutelage, Senusret became not only a capable warrior and conqueror but also a wise ruler. A king who understood the importance of justice, fairness, and the well-being of his people. His reign became a symbol of stability and prosperity. A time when Egypt's greatness was affirmed not just through external power but through internal peace. Neferu's emphasis on the importance of Ma'at, the cosmic balance that sustained the world, was central to Senusret's approach to leadership. The kingdom's laws were designed to maintain this balance, ensuring that justice was upheld and fairness prevailed. Egypt flourished because Senusret adhered to the ideals of Ma'at, and he did so with the guidance of Neferu, who had taught him the importance of leading with both strength and compassion. Neferu's influence on Egypt's cultural and religious life. Neferu's impact was not only political but also cultural and religious. While Senusret led Egypt to military and economic success, it was Neferu who had carefully nurtured the kingdom's spiritual and cultural life. She understood that the power of Egypt's rulers was deeply tied to their relationship with the gods, and she took great care in ensuring that Egypt's religious institutions remained strong and united under the pharaoh. Her active role in religious life ensured that Senusret's reign was closely aligned with the gods' will. The temples, monuments, and rituals that Senusret commissioned were not just for political gain but were also a testament to Egypt's devotion to the divine. Neferu's influence in the temple at Karnak and the construction of temples dedicated to Amun were instrumental in maintaining Egypt's religious integrity. These grand temples became symbols of Egypt's strength, places where the pharaoh could communicate with the gods and receive their blessing for the nation. Senusret also recognized the importance of culture in unifying Egypt's people. Under Neferu's influence, Senusret became a patron of the arts, ensuring that Egypt's cultural achievements were recognized and celebrated. The pharaoh commissioned great works of art, literature, and architecture that would leave a lasting legacy for centuries to come. The walls of Egypt's temples and tombs, covered in intricate hieroglyphs and art, told the stories of the gods, the pharaohs, and the triumphs of the kingdom, ensuring that Egypt's greatness would be remembered long after Senusret's time. Neferu's contribution to Egypt's cultural life was immeasurable. She instilled in her son the importance of preserving Egypt's cultural heritage while also encouraging innovation. Under her guidance, Egypt saw a flourishing of intellectual and artistic achievement that became a hallmark of the Middle Kingdom. The passing of Neferu. As the years went by, Neferu's health began to decline, though she had been the unwavering force behind Egypt's prosperity and Senusret's reign. Time, as it always does, took its toll, but even as her health waned, Neferu remained a vital presence in the court, offering her advice and wisdom until the very end. When Neferu passed away, Egypt mourned the loss of one of its greatest rulers, perhaps not in title, but in impact. The funeral procession was grand, with priests and noblemen paying their respects to the woman who had not only been the mother of the pharaoh but also one of the most influential figures in Egypt's history. Temples were built in her honor, and offerings were made to ensure that her spirit would find peace in the afterlife. Her death marked the end of an era, but her legacy lived on through her son's reign. Senusret I, now a mature and wise ruler, carried forth the lessons his mother had taught him. The principles of Ma'at, justice, fairness, and spiritual devotion continued to define Egypt under Senusret's leadership. Neferu's influence was felt long after her passing, not only in the policies and decisions Senusret made but in the very heart of Egypt itself. The prosperity, stability, and cultural flourishing of the Middle Kingdom were a direct result of her wisdom and guidance. Her life was a testament to the power of a mother's love and a queen's strength. and her legacy continued to shape Egypt for centuries to come. The enduring legacy. Neferu's legacy lived on in the monumental achievements of her son, Senusret I. Under his rule, Egypt became stronger than ever before. The kingdom expanded, its wealth grew, and its people prospered. But more than the material wealth or military victories, it was the stability and moral integrity of Senusret's reign that stood as a monument to his mother's guidance. Her teachings shaped his approach to governance, ensuring that Egypt remained a land of justice and prosperity, one that would leave its mark on the history of the ancient world. And as the great Pharaoh Senusret I looked back over his long reign, he knew that his greatest achievement, his legacy, was not the buildings he had constructed or the battles he had won, but the wisdom of the woman who had raised him, advised him, and shaped him into the ruler he had become. As the years passed, the kingdom of Egypt thrived under the leadership of Senusret I, whose reign became one of the most prosperous and celebrated in the history of the ancient world. Egypt was at the peak of its power, its borders secured, its economy flourishing, and its culture experiencing a renaissance. But beneath the outward success, there lingered an undeniable truth. Neferu, the guiding force behind her son's rise to greatness, was growing old, and her time on this earth was drawing to a close. Neferu had always been the quiet pillar that supported the grand structure of Egypt's monarchy. While Senusret's achievements were legendary, it was his mother's wisdom and steady hand that had shaped his success. Through the years, Neferu had remained a constant presence at the heart of the Egyptian court, offering counsel, managing delicate political situations, and ensuring that Egypt remained true to its traditions. But now, in the later years of her life, even she could feel the toll of time. Her health began to fail, and her once vibrant presence grew quieter. Senusret, now a seasoned and wise pharaoh, stood by his mother's side as she aged. Despite the grand successes of his reign, Senusret found himself facing the reality of losing the one person who had been his mentor, his protector, and his most trusted advisor. Neferu's love for her son had always been unconditional, but it was her unwavering dedication to Egypt's future that had truly defined her legacy. Even in her declining health, Neferu continued to impart her wisdom, ensuring that Senusret would continue to rule with justice and wisdom. As the days grew shorter for the queen, the court was filled with a sense of sadness. The people of Egypt, who had once revered Neferu as their queen, now revered her as a living legend. Her role in their lives had been central for so long, her influence so profound, that the thought of her passing was unthinkable. Yet, like all things in the natural world, Neferu's time was coming to an end. The end of an era. One quiet evening, in the palace that had seen the rise of Egypt's greatness, Neferu breathed her last. She passed away surrounded by her family, her closest advisors, and the servants who had cared for her throughout the years. Her death marked the end of an era for Egypt, a time when the wisdom of a single woman had shaped the course of a kingdom's history. Senusret, the great pharaoh who had risen to the height of power under his mother's guidance, now stood alone, his heart heavy with the loss of the woman who had been his mentor and his rock. The news of Neferu's passing spread quickly throughout Egypt, and the kingdom mourned the loss of one of its greatest figures. The priests, the generals, and the noblemen all came together to pay their respects to the queen, whose strength and wisdom had helped guide Egypt through some of its most challenging years. In every corner of the kingdom, the people wept, knowing that they had lost not just a queen but a true protector of Egypt. Senusret, though deeply saddened by the loss, knew that he had to carry on his mother's legacy. Neferu had always taught him that the strength of Egypt came not from one ruler but from the unity of its people, the dedication of its military, and the wisdom of its leaders. Senusret had already taken the reins of power, but in that moment, as he stood before the people to honor his mother, he realized the full extent of her influence on his reign. The grand funeral. The funeral of Queen Neferu was a grand and solemn event, one befitting her status as one of Egypt's greatest rulers. Even if she had never sat on the throne, her body was prepared for the afterlife with the customary rituals, and she was laid to rest in a tomb worthy of her contributions to Egypt. The people came to mourn, bringing flowers, incense, and offerings to honor the queen. The priests conducted sacred ceremonies to ensure that Neferu's soul would find peace in the afterlife. and statues of her were placed in temples throughout Egypt as symbols of her eternal legacy. Senusret, deeply grieving the loss of his mother, oversaw the funeral rites with a heavy heart. As he stood before her tomb, he reflected on the lessons Neferu had taught him. It was through her wisdom that he had been able to bring Egypt to such great heights. And it was her strength and vision that had allowed him to rule with fairness and justice. The queen had not only shaped his leadership but had also shaped Egypt's future. Her death left a void in Senusret's life, one that could never be filled. However, he knew that the best way to honor her was to continue the work she had started. Neferu had taught him that a ruler's legacy was not measured by the wealth he accumulated or the lands he conquered, but by the stability and prosperity he ensured for his people. Senusret knew that the greatest tribute he could give to his mother was to continue to rule Egypt with the same wisdom, justice, and compassion that she had instilled in him. Neferu's legacy. Even after her passing, Neferu's legacy lived on in Egypt. Her influence was felt in every corner of the kingdom, in the military, in the temples, and in the lives of the people. Egypt's stability, its prosperity, and its unity were all products of Neferu's unwavering dedication to her kingdom. She had been the quiet force that had shaped Egypt's future, and her impact would never be forgotten. As Senusret continued to rule, he carried with him the memory of his mother's teachings. Her wisdom guided his decisions, and her example inspired him to lead with fairness and wisdom. Neferu's influence was evident in the cultural and intellectual renaissance that continued to thrive under Senusret's rule. The temples, monuments, and art that Senusret commissioned were not only reflections of his power but also of the enduring legacy of his mother, whose vision had shaped Egypt's greatness. The eternal flame of Neferu. In the years that followed, Neferu was remembered as one of Egypt's most influential figures, a queen whose wisdom and strength had shaped the course of a nation. Statues and inscriptions honoring her were placed in temples, and her name was revered by the people as a symbol of leadership and dedication. Senusret ensured that the memory of his mother lived on, and the people of Egypt continued to honor her legacy long after her passing. Neferu's spirit lived on in the heart of Egypt, a kingdom that stood strong and united, its future shaped by the wisdom of a mother who had given everything for the prosperity and greatness of her people. And as the centuries passed, Egypt's rulers and people would continue to look back at Neferu's reign, not as a queen who had ruled from a throne, but as a guiding light whose influence had built the foundation for Egypt's most glorious age. As time marched on and Egypt continued to flourish under the reign of Senusret I, the memory of Queen Neferu remained indelible in the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people. Though her earthly presence had long since faded, her influence transcended the years, and her wisdom continued to resonate in every corner of the kingdom. Her teachings, her strength, and her unwavering devotion to Egypt had shaped the very foundation upon which the Middle Kingdom was built. And her legacy was as eternal as the Nile itself. Senusret I, now firmly established as one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, carried the weight of his mother's guidance with him every day. The principles she had instilled in him, justice, fairness, and the importance of unity, guided his decisions, ensuring that Egypt continued to thrive as a beacon of prosperity in the ancient world. While he had long since stepped into his role as a ruler in his own right, Senusret never forgot that it was Neferu who had taught him the true meaning of leadership, who had shown him that power was not merely about conquest, but about creating a just and harmonious society. The queen's influence was evident in every aspect of Senusret's rule, from the monumental temples he had built in her honor to the cultural renaissance that flourished during his reign. The legacy of Neferu's wisdom was woven into the very fabric of Egypt's success. Her role as both a protector and a teacher had shaped Egypt into a unified, strong, and prosperous kingdom, and that legacy would endure for generations. The preservation of Egypt's glory. Under Senusret I's continued leadership, Egypt saw even greater heights of achievement. The kingdom, with its borders secure and its wealth unmatched, became a symbol of ancient civilization's greatness. Egypt's cities were filled with towering monuments, grand temples, and vast libraries of knowledge. The arts, sciences, and intellectual pursuits flourished, thanks to Senusret's patronage, but it was Neferu's teachings that had planted the seed for Egypt's cultural prosperity. Senusret ensured that Egypt's military strength remained formidable, keeping watch over its vast empire and protecting its interests in Nubia and beyond. His campaigns were marked not by the thirst for conquest, but by a desire to maintain peace and stability throughout the region. He knew that Egypt's future lay not in expanding its borders, but in consolidating its power and ensuring that its people lived in peace and prosperity. And for that, he drew upon the wisdom his mother had imparted to him, that a true ruler governs not with the sword alone, but with the heart of justice and the soul of the gods. The cultural flourishing of Egypt. During Senusret's reign, Egypt was not only a military and economic power but a cultural hub of the ancient world. Great works of literature, art, and architecture were produced in abundance, and the people of Egypt flourished under the nurturing of their ruler, whose approach to governance mirrored the ideals that Neferu had instilled in him. The temples that Senusret commissioned, the monuments he built in honor of the gods, and the architectural wonders that stood as testaments to Egypt's might were all reminders of the queen's lasting influence on the cultural life of the kingdom. Neferu's personal patronage of the arts and intellectual pursuits had inspired Senusret to follow in her footsteps. As a young prince, Senusret had learned to appreciate the value of art, literature, and knowledge, lessons that his mother had imparted as she nurtured his mind. Now, as pharaoh, Senusret continued to encourage these pursuits, ensuring that Egypt's cultural legacy would endure for millennia. The arts of Egypt flourished during his reign, with monumental inscriptions telling stories of the gods, the pharaohs, and Egypt's triumphs. Sculptures, paintings, and grand buildings rose in honor of the divine, reflecting the prosperity that Neferu had envisioned for the kingdom. It was in these works of art that Neferu's influence was immortalized. For each statue, each temple, and each inscription carried with it the wisdom she had passed down to her son. The passing of time, decades passed, and Senusret's reign was marked by peace and prosperity. Egypt grew stronger, wealthier, and more united, just as Neferu had envisioned. But even as the years went on and Senusret aged, his mother's memory was always with him. He continued to consult her teachings, reminding himself of the values she had instilled in him, that justice, wisdom, and unity were the cornerstones of a strong kingdom. Egypt had remained true to these values under his rule, and Senusret ensured that future generations would remember the lessons that had been passed down from one pharaoh to the next. When Senusret I passed away, having led Egypt to its peak, his legacy was not just one of military victory or economic prosperity. His reign would be remembered for the way he governed, with wisdom, compassion, and the belief that the pharaoh's power came not from his strength alone, but from his ability to maintain Ma'at, the divine order that governed Egypt. And it was Neferu's legacy that had shaped his understanding of these ideals. Senusret's death marked the end of an era, but the memory of his mother, Queen Neferu, lived on. Temples dedicated to her were still visited by the people of Egypt, and her statues adorned the great cities. The values that she had instilled in her son, the importance of unity, the pursuit of justice, and the connection to the divine, were passed down to his successors, ensuring that Egypt would remain a beacon of civilization. In time, the story of Neferu, the mother who had shaped Egypt's greatest pharaoh, became a legend. Her name was spoken with reverence, and her wisdom was taught to future generations of rulers. She was remembered not as a queen who sat on a throne, but as a guiding force who had forged a kingdom from the heart of Egypt's soul. Her legacy was not only in the grand monuments that stood as testaments to Egypt's greatness but in the very spirit of the nation, a spirit that would endure for centuries. Long after her death, Egypt had been built by many hands, but it was Neferu's hands that had shaped its future. And her legacy was woven into every stone, every statue, and every heart that beat in Egypt's land. The eternal legacy of Neferu. As the centuries passed, the story of Neferu's influence remained etched in the annals of Egypt's history. The queen who had never worn a crown but whose wisdom had guided a nation's rulers was remembered as one of Egypt's greatest figures. Her teachings endured, passed down from one pharaoh to the next, as each ruler sought to emulate the wisdom, justice, and fairness that had made Neferu so beloved. In the hearts of the people, Neferu was immortal. The story of her life, her wisdom, her strength, and her unwavering devotion to Egypt became a legend, a tale that would inspire rulers, soldiers, and commoners alike for centuries to come. For as long as Egypt stood as a symbol of greatness in the ancient world, the influence of Queen Neferu, the mother of Senusret I, would never fade. Her legacy lived on, not just in the monuments and temples, but in the very spirit of Egypt itself. The reign of Senusret I passed into legend. His name etched in the annals of Egypt's history as one of the greatest pharaohs to ever rule. His military conquests, his diplomatic successes, and his cultural patronage all became the foundation upon which Egypt would continue to build its glory. But none of this would have been possible without the indomitable presence of the woman who shaped his path, Queen Neferu. Though she never wore a crown, Neferu's influence was far-reaching and profound. She was a mother, a guide, and a queen in all but name, and her teachings, wisdom, and strength provided the very bedrock upon which the greatness of Egypt rested. She was the silent architect of Senusret's success, the steady hand that ensured Egypt remained strong, united, and prosperous. The enduring legacy of Neferu was not only in her son's reign but in the kingdom itself, in Egypt that stood the test of time. Senusret, ever aware of his mother's impact on his life, continued to rule with the same values that Neferu had instilled in him: justice, fairness, and an unwavering commitment to the well-being of Egypt and its people. His reign would be remembered not just for military victories or monumental architecture but for the harmony and balance he brought to his kingdom. It was the legacy of Neferu that ensured that Egypt would thrive, that Egypt would remain a beacon of civilization for generations to come. As the centuries passed, the memory of Queen Neferu became intertwined with the story of Egypt itself. Monuments, statues, and inscriptions in her honor were placed in temples throughout the kingdom, and her name became synonymous with wisdom, strength, and the preservation of Egypt's sacred order. Neferu was revered not only as the mother of a great pharaoh but as a force of nature whose wisdom transcended her time on earth. Her teachings, passed down through the generations, became the guiding principles for Egypt's future rulers. The lessons Neferu imparted to Senusret were not only the foundations of his reign but the foundations of a thriving civilization. The belief in Ma'at, justice, truth, and cosmic balance, became the very essence of Egyptian rule, and it was Neferu's vision that helped preserve these ideals for centuries. Even in her passing, Neferu remained ever present in the hearts of the Egyptian people. Her wisdom had woven itself into the fabric of the kingdom's identity, becoming a part of Egypt's very soul. It was through her guidance that Senusret's reign was marked by peace and prosperity. And it was through her enduring legacy that Egypt would remain one of the greatest civilizations the world had ever known. As time moved on, the story of Queen Neferu, the woman behind Egypt's greatest pharaoh, lived on, told by storytellers, written by scholars, and passed down through the ages. The pharaoh who followed in her son's footsteps looked to her as a beacon of wisdom. And the people of Egypt, generation after generation, honored her memory as the woman who had shaped their nation. The kingdom of Egypt, under Senusret I, endured. It flourished in art, science, religion, and culture. And through it all, the eternal flame of Neferu's influence burned bright, a guiding light that would illuminate Egypt's path through the ages. Her name, her legacy, and her teachings would never be forgotten, just as Egypt's greatness would never fade. Neferu, the mother, the queen, the eternal guide, remained forever at the heart of Egypt, her wisdom lighting the way for all who came after.